Hi, I'm Bob Keesaer, architect with the City of Louisville. Signs are all around us. They inform us about where we are and guide us every day. Signs can even go beyond being basic elements of communication to creating a mood or ambience that enhances the architectural built environment. In this episode of Renovate Louisville, come join us as we look at signage from a different perspective.
Possibly one of the most fascinating aspects of any building is the limitless uses the structure can possess. Louisville serves as a great example of a city that adaptively reuses historic structures. As buildings age, their existence becomes chronicled. Their stages of life become chapters of existence. What was a dry goods storage warehouse a century ago could find a new life as an office complex today. Undoubtedly, buildings that have been granted new life in the form of something new should be celebrated.
I think one thing that I always go back to when I'm like photographing old signs or old like telephones or whatever, it's like the craftsmanship was so amazing, and we couldn't afford to make things like that today. I think I'm kind of like a peddler of nostalgia. So it's not always just about the sign, it's about people wanting to remember an important event in their life, and so.
I think they give us a sense of place, just like old buildings give us a sense of place, even if the original establishment isn't there anymore. It's a guide, it's a key, it tells us something about what happened there a long time ago. It also tells us a lot about the sign maker's art, which I think is resurging now in the world of neon and flashing light bulbs and animated things, animated signage, which I think is really important, and we've lost that. We have regulations that say you can't have animated signs anymore, and I think that's unfortunate.
First of all, if they've developed a logo, we want to incorporate that with the building. There's a dentist on Bardstown Road that we finally got a freestanding sign for him, and he had been in business for 20 years there, and he said business went up 30–40% because nobody knew he was there, and they saw his sign. They, that was a pleasure to have. He said it helped his business, and I liked that. That was good.
It is not surprising that with the natural progression of time, some of the chapters are forgotten while the structure remains. Signage, in the many forms it may take, is a silent but otherwise artistic declaration that here there was once life.
I think they engage a pedestrian because you have to look at the sign like the camera, and you have to wonder about it. It makes you think. It makes you wonder what it was in the past, and you do know. It's a very graphic example of what was there, even though it's not there anymore. And I think a plastic box sign is like a billboard. They're there, but you don't really see them.
Perhaps even more exciting is when these signs, some older than anyone you or I know, tell the world life still happens here. If it is true that where there is passion there is art, then architecture is certainly art. For the most part, signage does not keep a structure from falling down. It might be true that a neon sign, a painted advertisement, or a terrazzo entry could be removed without consequences to the building it is attached to. But the signage and the architectural style it accompanies share a connection.
Usually, if an architect designs a building and designs the sign with it, it's usually a home run, because they have that's what architects do. They create this image and then they follow it up with signage. Architects do make great images, and the whole feel for things, if it's Art Deco or turn of the century or something, it kind of gives you that luster and pizzazz that, I think it's good for business. Anything good for business, I'm for it.
Architectural styles vary and evolve over time, and the signage that occupies a given structure reflects the era in which that building was constructed.
Many of these signs actually blinked and moved and had rolling neon. And that in itself, I think, is very artistic work. If you go to Las Vegas, you see they even have museums for these types of signage. It's clues to our own past. It's clues to the sign maker's art, and I think that's important to all of us, no matter what community we live in.
Gold leaf was really prominent for doctors and lawyers because they were allowed a 3-inch letter that had their name on it. I mean, it was a profession, and they just had gold leaf. That was an expensive sign back then, and that's all they did.
More intriguing is that signage in all of its forms, from the neon of the 20s through the 60s to the LEDs of the present age, are inherently social. While buildings exist to house people and services, signage that accompany a structure serves to communicate to everyone who sees it. Signs direct, signs identify, signs promote, inform, and advertise. Signs allow their owners to speak to anyone who reads them. The human activity which takes place is named. A sign that has the potential to take a building that might otherwise be unnoticed and communicate its purpose, announcing to the world there is life here.
It's a reflection of individuality, and I think that's important. And I think it's important not to lose that.
I guess professionally, of course, yes, I enjoy bringing old things back, but personally, I'm kind of a history buff anyway, and I kind of go into what had happened, what was going on then.
Like all forms of communication, how something is said is as important as what is being said. The various forms and styles signage takes is a perfect example of this. If we view architecture as a form of expression, then it is only natural that the signage which accompanies a building is a form of art as well. Graphic design in the form of logos, advertisements, and other marketing techniques is a creative process. Signs, both historic and modern, 2- and 3-dimensional, can be works of art. Someone somewhere had to conceptualize the aesthetic nature of the design. While the quality of any artwork is subjective, the signs which exist today whisper truths about the time in which they were conceived.
I want to be able to talk to my grandchildren about those things and have them know that at one time people had they put so much thought into the aesthetics of what they were producing, because they don't see that. This generation doesn't see that things were made for a function, but they were also beautiful.
A wise man once said, to never eliminate or shortchange the essential magic that flows directly from the mind to the hand. An artist's inspiration is necessary to create signage, but a craftsman's hands are needed to bring an idea into the physical realm.
I'm not sure I would say we're artists, we're craftsmen. William J. Roos started the sign company in 1912. He was a wagon wheel painter that did the pinstriping on wagon wheels, and they had a little place down on Second River. And he was good at it, so he started a sign business in 1912. Back in the 60s, we had billboards, and my dad was always grabbing me on Saturday doing work. I worked there in the summers when I wasn't lifeguarding at Plantation. I was getting out of college, and there was 2 roof sign companies. My father's in St. Matthews was painting in billboards, and then his uncles and his relatives had an electric sign company, and Hanover Manufacturing had bought them, and then Hanover Manufacturing sold out to Cummings. They moved their operation to Nashville. They sent everybody to Nashville, kept them 1 year and fired them, and I was getting out of college, so I put those pieces together from William J. Roos Sign Company, incorporated with our sign company, and we just kept the ball rolling with the same people.
At times, the artist and the craftsman are one and the same.
A fast runner makes a good athlete. You know, if you've got artistic talent and know how things look in perspective and can see things, it's easier to adapt to the sign business. But we're basically craftsmen. Now the artist, a real artist that to create something is just fun to follow.
Skill and patience are needed to create these urban sculptures.
Well, we like to work with, I guess you could call it bones and skin. our bones are steel. We use steel for structure, and then all the skinning is done in aluminum. You want to be able to convey your message, what you do and how you do it or whatever. If you can put that in your sign, then we've achieved something.
Some skills, such as working with neon gas, is a skill that is becoming increasingly rare.
Of course, neon was back in the 20s. The French had developed a way of illuminating glass tube by passing current, high voltage current through transformers with neon gas and argon gas. Now, what everybody's confused about, there's only one color in neon that's red. All the other colors, all the pastel colors are argon, and you have to put a little mercury in there to brighten them up, especially in the wintertime, they get a little dull. Some of the glass is hard to duplicate now because there's no lead in our glass. It's sometimes easier just to make it all over than to try to patch leaded glass with non-leaded glass. So we just make it all over.
You cannot make the buildings that we had 150 years ago because that know-how is gone, that talent is dead. And I think that's true with sign makers. There used to be little guys who would walk down the street in Louisville who were sign painters. And they were old guys, and I would see them even on this street, and they'd walk from business to business with their little paint boxes.
Signage in all formats can be beautiful, especially when a style of signage is no longer used, making it a historic gem.
My dad kind of developed a way of bringing old porcelain back with a rubbing technique, and that's an interesting thing to do. And it's kind of, it's fun to do, to see one of those old things come back to life.
Because buildings go through phases of life, being something one day and something completely different a decade later, signage can come and go. They can disappear, taking an entire chapter of a building's history with it. It can be difficult for an owner to justify keeping a sign, particularly a historic sign, when the sign itself doesn't match the building's current purpose.
I mean, they are public relics. They are relics of our own past, and they're perfectly wonderful things to reuse.
However, there are instances when a new business adopts historic signage and adapts them so that they are no longer out of place.
I can't imagine not reusing something as marvelous as a neon camera. I've never seen another one like it. What you see behind me is actually the third incarnation of the Schumann's Click Clinic sign. Schumann's, I believe, installed the signs in the late 40s. They were an established business here on Chestnut Street until about 2001. Back in those times, there was a gentleman who ran a number of adult entertainment establishments in this particular part of downtown Louisville. I encouraged him to talk to some of the neon sign companies here in town. There were a number of them in those days that were doing that type of work, and it refurbished some other signs on Bardstown Road. And so he got together with them, and actually we turned Schumann's into show and tell. So until that establishment went out of business, probably about 4 or 5 years ago now, then this particular new business, Meta, came in, which is a bar, I believe, nightclub. And I knew the owner of this building as well, and so I also encouraged him to recycle the sign and reuse it as they have done.
Historic signage, like historic buildings, is defined by the era they were crafted, and some of those styles of craftsmanship no longer exist.
As a child on 4th Street, you could walk up and down the street and see these wonderful animated neon signs and you know, pens and arrows and animals and cocktail shakers, and they danced and they sang and they knocked you over the head with their glory, and you just don't get that feeling anymore with a piece of plastic in a frame.
Like a historic building, it becomes tangible history, telling the story of an era that could be forever lost otherwise.
Thanks for joining us on this unique urban adventure. And we'll look for you next time on Renovate Louisville.